Hi guys, it's Beverly from Beverly's Crafts. Today we're going to do a Premier yarn project idea, the Prairie Shawl with the Premier Rodeo yarn. And I received 2 skeins of this in my MaryMaxim mystery box, but this yarn is currently on sale at the Premier website. For this project, we're going to need 2 of these, and again, it's a knitting tutorial. I'm going to show you what you need. First you need to go to the Premier website, and I will have the link below to print the pattern. It's called the Prairie Shawl, and it says it's intermediate. The reason it's intermediate is because you're going to be doing yarn overs, which are increases, and you're going to be doing decreases, which are knitting 2 together and purling 2 together. But I promise we're going to do this together and you'll be able to complete it. Now, before I get into the pattern a little bit, I want to tell you what you're going to need. You're going to need a set of 9-inch circular needles, size 9. Okay, now this only has an 18-inch cable, so I may have to end up going and buying another pair. But I got these from a yard sale, and I measured, from the cable from here over, so it might actually be bigger or smaller than that, depending on where the sophisticated knitter would measure the cable. But a size 9, and if you're going to go out and buy the needles, I would probably get the 36-inch or the 29. But I figure I'll either buy another set of needles or cram all the stitches together. We'll see how it goes. So that's the size of needles. Then I'm going to show you close up. You need some stitch markers. You just need 2, or you could have 4, which you would put it over here before your knit 2s, but this will make more sense. So 2 or 4 of the knitting stitch markers, okay? The knitting stitch markers are round, and you've seen some of the real pretty ones on the web. Some of those can be used for knitting or crochet, and the plastic safety pins ones, they could be used as well. What you would do is just close the safety pin and then just run it on here rather than hooking it into the stitches like you would when you would crochet. Okay, so your needles and your stitch markers. You will need a row counter. Okay, there's a row counter, and on my work I'm on row 10 of our shawl. Okay, and of course you got to print the pattern. There'll be a link below for the pattern. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the pattern, but I am going to tell you that I'm going to be doing the tutorial in steps, because I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try to do it, but you can see there's different variations in the pattern, okay? So when we start the tutorial, the first part of the tutorial will be the first 21 rows. That's what you'll be doing, and I'm going to stay with you probably to, I think it's the 7th or 8th row. And I started this at the same time as I did the tutorial, so I probably should have done it a practice, but I didn't. I let you see my struggle, and so that you can emphasize, you know what I mean, and see that you're not alone. But it's very important to print your pattern. Then what would happen is after row 21, there's some knit rows and things like that, variations. But then the next blocks, you're going to do a pattern that is 26 to 41, and then from 42 to 61 you're going to be doing a group, and so you're kind of getting it. And then we have to do the edging, okay? But don't let this scare you, because some of the rows, I'm looking at this right now, it's all knit, okay? Some of the rows are knit 2, purl all the way across, knit 2, easy. And I promise you'll be able to do this watching TV, okay? So please print out your pattern, get ready to do the first section of the pattern, and thanks for watching. Hi guys, this is Beverly from Beverly's Crafts. Today we're going to do a knitting tutorial on the Premier Prairie Shawl. It's a knitted shawl, and you can see it has a level of intermediate. But I'm going to be showing you the main stitches, and you shouldn't have a problem. I'm not affiliated with Premier. I just love their yarns, and this yarn we're going to be using today is the Premier Rodeo. Now, I received this yarn in a MaryMaxim mystery bag or box, and I'm going to be doing an unboxing from them next week. I ordered another one, but this is Premier yarn. This pattern calls for 2 skeins of this, and that's what I got in my mystery box, was 2 skeins, and that's what we're going to use today. I'd also like to thank you for checking in with me, and if you would subscribe, comment, and let me know what other videos you might like to see, and please like the video as well. Tell your friends. Okay, so we're going to start knitting. I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to get the yarn started coming out of the skein. Okay, the yarn came out really easy from the skein, from the center. I'm going to do a center pull, and I wanted to mention that this yarn was on clearance on the PremierYarn.com website. So if you want to stop by there, maybe you can grab some. We're going to read the pattern, and the pattern you can print it out online at Premier.com, and again it's PremierYarn.com, and yarns with an S, PremierYarns.com. It's called the Prairie Shawl, and it's a knit. So here we go. Now, I'm not going to be doing this really super slow because there are other knit tutorials on the web, and if you want me to make a beginner knit tutorial, please let me know in the comments, or you can email me below. Now, reading the pattern, I'm assuming you've printed it out. It says to cast on 5 stitches, and I do the long tail cast on, but I don't like to go crazy with making a long tail cast on, so I'm going to start with like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to slip knot. And if you watched any of my videos before, I don't make a big deal of the slip knot. If any slip knot that you've made in your entire life will be good for this pattern. Now, this calls for a 9-inch knitting needle. It doesn't say to use a circular, but I'm just assuming you would use a circular. This is a 9-inch. It has a wire, or whatever we want to call it, of 18 inches. And that might be off from a lot of you experienced knitters, because this didn't come in a pack. I got it at a yard sale. And I just measured the wire or cable here, and it came out like 18 inches. Now, as the shawl progresses, I might have to go buy a set that has a long one, or I could just easily shove the stitches together. But that's what I'm starting with. So I have my little slip knot, make it any way that you want to make it. And here's how I do my long tail cast on. I wrapped it around my thumb. I bring my working yarn over the needle and I move my thumb over. So if you didn't see that from the beginning, we're going to have to do a total of 5 stitches. So we have 2. One is the slip knot and one is the first one. See how I got my thumb going under the yarn? I come over, I got a loop on the top of my thumb. I'm going to take and put the needle under it, then wrap it and pull off. Okay, so there's 3. So we got 2 more for you to watch me. Underneath, you get a loop, wrap the yarn, pull it. One more time. There's it. And there you go. So now we have 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now we're going to turn the work. And see, my tail is still a little longer. And believe it or not, it's longer than I like, but we'll just leave it there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to do the right side row. And if you take a look at your work, if you ever get mixed up, the right side of the work always has the tail on the right side. In this case, because I think I've done some with the tail on the left, but at this point, this is where we're at. Okay, let's see, maybe the tail, no, it's there. Okay, so we're going to knit 2. So you go in from the right side. This is your working yarn. We're going to 1 and 2. Now it says to yarn over. So I'm going to take the yarn and go like this, forward, and then knit 1. So I'm going to take this, go into the next stitch, and as I'm bringing this over, to do the knit stitch, that creates my yarn over, which makes me add a stitch right there. Then it says to yarn over again, so that means bring the yarn forward, and it says to yarn over and knit 2. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go into my my next stitch on the left side, go around. Now I have 2 stitches. I'm going to do it again so you get to see that again. So there it is. Go in, wrap around, and make our stitch. And then it says to knit the last one. Okay, now at this point, at the end of this row, it tells you that you should have 7 stitches. So I'm having trouble with the last one, but we're going to get it. So we just don't give up. Okay, wrap it around for a knit. And there we go. See, you can see, even though I'm experienced, you might struggle a little bit. Okay, so now it says we should have 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it says to use a removable stitch marker to mark the center stitch. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pause the video and get a stitch marker. Okay, I got the stitch marker. Now, what it's saying is that we need to mark the center stitch. So we have 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means 3 on each side, obviously. So I'm going to take my stitch marker and I'm going to put it, I'm going to turn it so I can see it, but I'm going to put it right on there. So I found the center stitch. I'm going to put it on, and when I get it hooked, then you guys can see it. Might take a little struggle. There it is. I got it. And so we're gonna, okay, so there it is. If you can see, I got 3 on each side, and then I put the stitch marker around the 7th, okay, or the center, and that's what they want us to mark. Now they want us to do row 2, so we're going to turn our work, and when you're knitting, how you know where you're going to start is the working yarn is on the right, okay? And I'm going to move my yarn over here because, like I said in one of my previous videos, when I knit, my yarn goes on the right. When I crochet, my yarn goes on the left. That's just my preference. And I also wanted to do a shout out to another YouTuber, and her name is All Things Crochet and Knit with Kit. And she has been knitting a lot of shawls. And so I had this rodeo yarn. It was in my want to make video. And this is what I want to make with it. So in my want to make videos, it gives you suggestions on what you should make. If you're having trouble deciding, you've bought all this yarn with what you want to make with it, please tune in and watch my want to make videos. Okay, now the next row is row 2. So it says to knit 2. So here we go. We're going to knit 2. Okay, so you knit 2. And then it says to purl to the last stitch. Now this is our first yarn over. So we're just going to take our yarn and bring it forward to purl. And we're just going to go in that loop. And it's fine if it's loosey-goosey. It's absolutely fine. It will tighten up. So now we're going to move over here and purl. And purl. And then it says to knit the last 2 stitches. And see, this one is kind of loose because that was a yarn over. So now we're going to knit these 2. And that was row 2. Okay? And it appears that the even numbered rows, okay, which that would be obviously 2, 4, 6, and 8 are going to be, yes, are going to be knit 2, purl 2, or knit 2, purl all the way across, and knit 2, okay? Knit 2, purl all the way across to the last 2, and knit. Now hopefully with this yarn you can see what we've got. Now we're going to move on to row 3. We're going to turn our work, and the cable makes it a little bit more awkward. Your yarn might get tangled in it, but you'll figure it out. Okay, so we're ready for row 3. Row 3 says to knit 2, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to knit, and if your stitches get tight, just kind of give them a shove and they'll loosen up. So that was knit 2. Now it says to yarn over, knit 1. But if you look at the pattern, the yarn over knit 1 is in parentheses. So what you've got to pay attention to the punctuation. And in my how to crochet video, I mentioned if you were reading a sentence or a paragraph, you would pause or take a breath at the punctuations. So for example, it said knit 2, comma. So that's what I do. I come to my work, I knit 2, and I stop. Then I look at the next set of instructions and follow the punctuation. So then this row, it says yarn over, knit 1 3 times, but it's in punctuation. So that means 3 separate times, okay? So I did my yarn over, which means to bring the yarn forward. Now it says to knit 1, okay? Yarn over, knit 1. Yarn over, knit 1. Yarn over, knit 1. Then it says to yarn over and knit 2. So that's what we followed the punctuation. And at the end of the sentence it says there should be 11 stitches. So let's count our stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so we have 11. Now we're going to turn our work, and this was row 3. So as I just mentioned, row 4 is an even row, so it's going to be the same as row 2. And row 4 says knit 2, comma. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to knit 2 and stop. And see, when I read my pattern, I don't read the whole sentence all in a row. I stop at the punctuation so that I don't get overwhelmed. Knit 2. Okay, I stopped. Now it says purl to the last 2 stitches. And there is a comma. So that's what we're going to stop, and we're going to do that. So even though we got these big loops, those are our yarn overs. And I promise they're going to make holes, but they won't be all loopy like this, okay? So we're going to go all the way to the last 2 stitches, purling. So purl, purl, and purl. And then we did that, and we have 2 stitches left, so the yarn goes to the back, and we're going to knit 2. And there's a period, so obviously we stop. Okay, and there's our shawl so far. Okay, now we're going to turn our work, and we're going to do row 5. Okay, row 5 says knit 2, and there's a comma, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to knit 2 and stop. Okay, and look at our pattern. So there's our knit 2, and again, just kind of nudge them up there. Knit to the center stitch marker. Okay, so the center stitch marker is on this stitch right up here, but we can count our stitches. So we have 11 stitches. So that means the one in the center, 5 on each side, is the center one. Okay, so we'll check it. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and see that stitch marker, if you can see it, is right on that center stitch, which is right there. And then we have 5 on the other side. Okay, 2, 4, 5. So it says to knit to the center stitch, and of course you can move that marker up, but if you can figure it out like I have, then there's no need to move it, and I probably will move it. All right, so now it said to yarn over, which means bring the yarn forward and knit to the center stitch marker. So that means at this point we're going to knit 3. So yarn back and then knit 3. Okay, and then there's our center stitch. And at the center stitch, it says to yarn over, knit the center stitch, yarn over, and knit to the last 2 stitches. Okay, so we're going to go right over here and knit these stitches, and I have 2 stitches left on my needle, and it says to yarn over and knit 2. Okay, so again, this stitch right here is the center stitch, and if you wanted, you could count them: 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6. Oh, let's see how we do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's the center stitch. So if you feel more comfortable, you can move it up. So when our work was smaller, it was a little bit harder. Okay, so we said 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means right on here, you can go ahead and move it up. And if you look, see, I got it right below there. And I'm going to put my stitch marker on. And then that marks this stitch as the center. 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay. And you can see that our shawl is coming out a little by little. Okay. All right. So now it says to repeat rows 4 and 5. Okay. And we're going to be doing rows 6 through 21. So at this point, we want to get a stitch marker. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and get a stitch marker. Okay, here's a stitch marker. There's all kinds of stitch markers, or stitch counters, excuse me, row counter. So we're going to put this back to 0 on this side, and on this side we just completed row 5. So we're going to turn this back to row 5, and that's how we're going to keep track. Okay, so we have 5 rows done, and the pattern says for rows 6 through 21, we're going to repeat rows 4 and 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat 4 and 5 in this video, and then you'll just be repeating those rows until your counter says 21. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now, I got my marker over here. I'm going to pick up my needles, and I know when I laid it down, how do I know which side is the right side or the correct side to begin? And it's the side with the working yarn coming off of it. Okay, row 4 is our easy row. And see, when you're watching TV, that will be your mindless row. But you'll get the row 5 mindless too. Okay, because we want to be able to watch TV with these projects. I had a couple projects this week that I attempted, and one had an 18-row repeat, and I decided that it was not TV watching material. So I went on to something that was, and I'll be showing you some of my works in progress in another video. Okay, so we're ready to do row 4, and we know row 4 is an easy row, and you can see my cable flopping around. That's how it is when you're working on it. Okay, so row 4, we're going to read row 4. It says knit 2, so let's knit 2. And again, my stitches are a little snug because I had them stretched out, so I'm going to push them in a little. So this is row 4, and this is your kind of mindless row. So row 4 says to knit 2, and then purl to the last 2. So here we go. So we're just going to purl, and again, those loopy stitches are our yarn overs, and they'll be fine. Now, another word for the yarn overs, or what the yarn overs actually are increases. Yarn overs are increases, and at this point I'm just purling, okay, and another purl to the last 2. So when your shawl starts getting gigantic, this row is going to be knit 2, purl all the way across to the last 2. So that's going to be your easy row, and then the other row will become easy. Okay, now it says to knit the last 2, so we're going to come here and we're going to knit 2. Okay, so again, until we get to row 21, we're going to be doing rows 4 and 5. So that was row 6, so I'm going to take my stitch marker and turn it to row 6. Okay, turn my work, and I know that the yarn is coming off from the right, so I've got it facing in the right direction. And this stitch right here is my center stitch. Okay, and you can always count. Of course, when the work gets real big, it'll drive you crazy if you have to count every time. But if you move it up as you go, you'll be fine. So there's our center stitch, because our pattern says that we're going to knit to the center stitch. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 7. So at this point we are small enough still that we're going to count them. Okay, so the pattern says knit 2, and there's a comma. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to knit 2, and we're going to take a breath. Then the next instruction says to yarn over and knit to the center one. Okay, so we're going to knit to the center stitch marker. And again, my stitches, see how they got a little snug over this little humpy thing, but we'll get there. Okay, now I'm going to take a look at my work to make sure that that's my center stitch. So let's see what we got. It appears that this is the center stitch. Yes, it is. So we're going to knit here, and what we're going to do here is look at the directions, yarn over, and we're going to knit the center stitch, yarn over, and continue. Now I'm going to change to another stitch marker, another type of stitch marker for knitting. This is a crochet stitch marker, so I'm going to go ahead and switch the other stitch marker, which I should have used from the beginning. Sorry about that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So what we're going to do, since we're still real small here, is we're going to use these round stitch markers. These are for knitting. This kind is for crochet. Okay, so we know that we had 7 stitches from that row before, so, and then from here you'll be fine. 2, 4, 2, 4, 6, 7. So that meant, and I'm going to unknit myself, and that's how, if you make a mistake, you just kind of unknit yourself. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, and so I'm going to unknit myself right here, and you just go in that little loop below and pull that off. Okay, so let's take a look at our work. All right, so knit 2, yarn over, knit to the center stitch. Okay, then we put in a stitch marker. Now I know that I'm supposed to yarn over, knit 1. I'm going to put and yarn over and knit to the end where we have 2 stitches left. And yarn over. Okay, so I'm going to show you this row one more time because I don't want you to be confused, and you just might be. Okay, so we're going to move this stitch marker again, and I'm going to move it in the next row. Okay, so here we go. We're going over in the next row. See, this is the first time I've done this pattern, so we're learning together. So this is row, that was row, where's my marker? There's my counter. So that was row 7. So we're going to do the easy row. This is row 4, but it's actually row 8. Okay, we're going to knit 2 and purl all the way to the next last 2. So we're just going to purl and purl. Okay. And purl, 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 and purl. Okay, and then this is actually the center stitch. Okay, so we're going to put that marker in and purl. Okay, so let's take a look here. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 where I put in the stitch marker. There's the center stitch. Okay, now I'm going to keep purling. I'm going to get rid of this stitch marker. How are we going to do this? Because we want to mark that center stitch. So I think I'm going to put a stitch marker on both sides, because when we come from the other side we might get confused. So that's the center stitch. Okay, and I think that will serve our purpose. So me and you are learning together. There's our center stitch, and we'll count them when we get done and make sure. Okay, but I think that we're good. I'm sorry that my hand got out of the is taking over the camera, but it looks like that's how it's going to go for knitting. And then we need to knit these last 2. Okay. And there's our lacy little shawl. Now, let's take a look at our stitches before we turn it and make sure that this one between the markers is our center stitch. So we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. So now we have that center stitch encased within a stitch marker. So now we're going to turn our work. That was row 8. Now we're going to do row 9, and row 9 is the same as row 5. So row 5 says to knit 2. Yarn over, and it says to knit all the way to the center stitch. I got one more here. Now we're going to yarn over, and we're going to take off the stitch marker. I think we're going to leave it. Just see how this works. Yarn over. And see how I got the stitch marker? And there's a knit. Okay. And I'm going to move the stitch marker, yarn over, and knit. Okay. And that way we've still encased that one center stitch. And now we're going to knit to the last 2. And there's our last 2. And it says to yarn over and knit 2. Okay, now we're going to stop here. And we know that this is row 9. So let's do our stitch marker or counter before we examine our stitches. So let's examine our stitches here. And there's our shawl. And so you can see there's the center coming down. So let's count our stitches and take a look. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, now let's just leave that for 1 second and go to the other side. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So that worked. Okay. So what I did was I knitted the 2, I did my yarn over, and I knitted to what was the center stitch. Okay, so pretend that one's not there right now. Then I did a yarn over, then I put my stitch marker there before I knitted this stitch, and then I put my stitch marker there before I did my yarn over, and then I knitted to the last 2, and I did a yarn over and a knit. So that last row that we just finished is how you're going to be doing it the rest of the pattern. Okay, and see there's your center stitch, and you can see the center right there. Okay, and then the shawl is going to be growing on each side. Now the next row is our easy row, which we know is going to be knit 2 and then purled to the stitch marker, and just move these, slip them over, and then purl, and then the last 2 you knit. And then what's going to happen the next time is you're going to yarn over, put the marker, knit the stitch, put the marker, yarn over, knit the stitch. So watch the video, read the instructions, comment below, please subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you.